What's up, guys? This is the Gospel According to Mark with a C. He is I, and I am he. Just taking some time to tell you exactly what's on my mind. Thank you for joining me once again, my friends. Now listen, guys, let's jump right into this. When you watch a courtroom drama, whether it's the movies or TV, inevitably you're going to hear one of the lawyers say something to the effect of, "Objection, Your Honor, leading the witness." Now look, I'm not a lawyer, okay? I could be wrong, but my understanding of that has always been that one of the lawyers are trying to manipulate someone into drawing the conclusion that they want them to draw in order to sway the opinion of the jury or the judge or something like that. They want them to say what they want them to say. They want them to think what they want them to think. And so that's what it means. To me, I could be wrong, all right? Now, how do I put this in the context of what I'm talking about here? You guys know I've always felt like the media as it stands today is an enemy to the people all around. I don't care what race you are, religion, whatever. I feel like we are being massively manipulated by this media, okay? So let's jump into this case right here. Having said that, all right, I got a question for you guys. And you know my favorite question in the whole world, my favorite word ever, is why, okay? So the challenge to you guys is I want you to consider why. Why is this what I'm about to talk about here, all right? So let's get into this. I want to ask you this question. Have you ever heard the name Edward Bronstein? Edward Bronstein. Now, some of you might. I'm guessing most of you haven't, because I certainly haven't until maybe a couple of days ago. I saw this on the news, and this is interesting considering the story is from 2020, but there's been a whole lot of other things that's been going on, so the story got buried, okay? Like when you talk about police brutality, easily the biggest story out of 2020 as far as police brutality is concerned was George Floyd. But what would you say if I told you there was a story just like the story of George Floyd, and it actually happened 2 months before George Floyd, almost just like what happened to George Floyd, yet nobody knows, the vast majority of people don't know Edward Bronstein's name. Now, why? There's that word again. Why? Why do you think that is, guys? Anyone? Yeah, you guessed it. Well, you saw the thumbnail. You cheated. It's because Edward Bronstein is not a black man. Edward Bronstein is white. And guys, you know, I've talked about this plenty of times before. And usually it results in people getting in my comment section, calling me a liar, calling me a self-hater, even though I'm just talking about the facts. The fact of the matter is that there are many more white people who are killed in police custody per year in America than there are black people. That is the truth. The fact that you feel like it's a lie, a lot of you, it just goes to the reality of how much we are manipulated in this society. Now, you would ask yourself, why does it matter? Well, if you believe that Black Lives Matter, then you know that it matters because you're objecting to the taking of an innocent life, right? You just happen to be going under the assumption that there are more black lives that are taken than white lives. And so you come to the conclusion that black people are under attack. Thus, you need to be shouting Black Lives Matter. Thus, what's his name? Kaepernick has to be kneeling at games. Thus, people have to be protesting. Thus, people have to be rioting. All right. But the acceptance of the reality that this happens to white people too should lead us to understand what the problem is a little bit more. And if you ask me, it will keep us from being manipulated the way that I feel that we are. But I'll get into that in a minute. Let's talk about Edward Bronstein, shall we? This was in CNN.com, and I'm going to read this to you guys because I saw it like all over the place because what it is the video footage of Edward Bronstein being killed by the police has recently been released after over 3 years. All right, so people are talking about it here and there. I shouldn't say that I heard about it everywhere, but I did hear about it. But of course, it's not making news the same way as George Floyd. So let's get into this story, shall we? I'm going to read a little bit here. It says, 7 officers and a nurse are charged with involuntary manslaughter in the 2020 killing of a man in police custody in Los Angeles County. 7 California Highway Patrol officers and a registered nurse were charged for the 2020 death of a man who was being restrained on the ground and repeatedly said he could not breathe. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Kaskin announced at a news conference. Now, Edward Bronstein, 38, was killed in police custody in March 2020 after officers pulled him over in Los Angeles County after suspecting he was driving under the influence. Now, the officers obtained a warrant to get a blood sample from Bronstein, who initially resisted, vocally, by the way. All right, I did see the video, unfortunately. It was about 17, maybe 18 minutes of him being upset. You know, he wasn't fighting the cops. He was more like just kind of, I don't know, not being as limp as he should be, you know, like stiffening up and stuff like that. He didn't want to have his hands put behind him. He was on his knees. And he was outraged, you know, as a lot of us would be. Now, they said that he was driving irrationally, which is the reason why they say he was pulled over. All right, so they suspected that he was under the influence, and so they wanted to get a blood sample from him. But let's go on with the, story here. All right, so they were charged with involuntary manslaughter and 1 count of assault by an officer, while the nurse who took a sample of Bronstein's blood was charged with 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, according to the complaint. CNN has reached out for comment to the attorneys representing the defendants in a federal lawsuit against them regarding Bronstein's death, and they're working to identify the attorneys representing them in the criminal case, and has also reached out to the California Highway Patrol for comment. Now, the body camera released last year as part of a federal lawsuit against the California Highway Patrol and those allegedly involved. Bronstein is heard repeatedly telling officers, "I can't breathe." Now, keep in mind, guys, this was 2 months before George Floyd. Like I said, I saw the video. He was screaming, "I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!" That's what he sounded like, okay, while pinned on the ground. Those same 3 words were echoed by George Floyd less than 2 months later before he was killed when he was restrained by Minneapolis police in May of 2020. Now, Floyd's murder, of course, you guys remember, nobody could get away from this. It sparked national and global protests against police brutality and racial injustices, spurring a national reckoning over the way law enforcement treats Black Americans. The officer who killed Floyd, Derek Chauvin, was convicted of murder in April 2021. Now, of course, that is true. However, like I said before, the question is burning. Why? Why did nobody hear about Edward Bronstein? Edward Bronstein was a father of 5. I think that his life would matter to them. Black lives matter. White lives matter. Asian lives matter. Indian lives matter. Latino lives matter. Dad's lives matter. He was a father, okay? As far as I know, nobody marched for him. You know, nobody came on TV, you know, talking about, you know, there's an open season on dads or anything like that. He was just killed in much the same way 2 months before. And I want to point out, too, guys, that while we don't want to acknowledge things like this, the proof, the evidence is there, and it is something that we need to think about, because when we're being manipulated the way that we are, and we believe that we're victims and we're being hunted, to Black people ourselves, it devalues our lives. How we feel about ourselves. When we feel like we're being hunted, like people are killing us, we feel down on life. We feel hopeless in life. Our children feel hopeless in life because we identify this problem as a racial problem, when the fact is that it's the media that makes this a racial problem. When you highlight George Floyd, which was tragic, don't get me wrong, but you highlight George Floyd to the exclusion and the ignoring of Edward Bronstein. And it's not just Edward Bronstein, for everybody who's out there thinking, oh, well, he got one, but there's still more of us. Well, let me ask you, so you didn't hear about Edward Bronstein. Did you hear about, what's the other one's name? Tony Timpa. Did you hear about Tony Timpa, who died in police custody as well? And when he died, the police were joking around him. He's another one who couldn't breathe. Another white man who couldn't breathe. All right. Who is the other one? Shaver, Daniel Shaver, who was gunned down while on his knees in front of cops. Cut down. Another white man. All right. Who was begging for his life. Please, please don't shoot me. He was shot. How about the 12-year-old story that I covered before? 12-year-old little white boy, TJ Sedario, who got shot in his back running from the cops. Little white boy, you know, uh, just like Tamir Rice, you know, same thing, little boy, 12 years old, got shot running from the cops, unarmed. All right, or I believe he might have had something and he dropped it. He was running. But the fact of the matter is that white people do get killed by the cops. But the question is, why? Why doesn't the media cover it? As black people, we have to ask ourselves that, because none of us like being somebody's sucker. But in the end, I start feeling like we're being manipulated. Notice something else here. When these cops kill, nobody has yet to ask, especially like I said, bring it back up to Edward Bronstein. Nobody has yet to ask whether these cops were raised by single mothers. Nobody is asking, how they feel about, white people, whether they're biased, whether they had any previous encounters with white people before they shot white people. It's all a manipulation thing. You know what I mean? That's the reason why I objected to the way we went with that whole Tyree Nichols situation when Jason Whitlock came out talking about, these cops are the products of single black mothers and everything. Okay, you want to make the point against single black mothers. Okay, there's an issue there, but it doesn't belong in this conversation. If you put it in this conversation, I'm going to call you out for being a manipulator, a media manipulator. And that's what we have a lot of these days. And that's the point that I was trying to make. Some of you didn't understand that with the other video, But that's what's happening, guys. And when we talk about, like I heard someone say, recently, it's been brought up, reparations. People are talking about reparations. I say that the media owes all of us reparations because the media in the 20th and 21st century has easily been one of the most destructive forces in society today. And this is a perfect example of that. When you have human beings being killed by law enforcement, that in itself should be the issue. The media manipulates the racial aspect of it, which ends up turning us even more against one another, which keeps this problem going. You know what I'm saying? It's like you really have to look at what this has been. The legacy of popular news media today has been a destructive one. And this is the reason why I want people to ask, why? Why would you hear about George Floyd, as bad as it was what happened to him, but not hear about Edward Bronstein, but not hear about the other one that I was talking about, Tony Timpa, would not hear about Daniel Shaver, would not hear about TJ Sedario, and all of the others that are out there? This is not a competition. This is something that we all should be thinking about. The question is why? Because I'm tired of being manipulated. I'm tired of waiting for the next story that the media wants to blow up. Black people, shouldn't you be outraged? Black people, and then you have Hollywood jump on the bandwagon. This is not empowering. This is the exact opposite, because you see what it does to all of our pop culture. There's no representation. There's no representation. It's all part of the same bag, man. It's all part of making us feel like we're helpless in all of this when we're not. The thing that empowers us is first asking the question, why? Sincerely, and then seeking the answer. And once we get the answer, which we all know what it is, the media, the country, the government, the powers that be manipulating the people against one another so we can't see what they're doing. Once we get that answer, we can act accordingly. And that's what they're afraid of more than anything else. Knowledge is power. Get you some. All right, guys, I just wanted to ask that question. The question is why. If anyone has any answers to the question of why we would talk about one and not talk about the other, and we already established that it is not because it disproportionately happens to blacks. It doesn't, guys. All right, lives lost are lives lost. Martin Luther King Jr. said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we need to start acting accordingly. So get in the comment section and let me know what you think about this, guys. Thank you for listening. I will catch you on the next one. This is The Gospel According to Mark with a C. Rock on.